Hey, Doc.
What got me, I remember there was a certain point I went to an Israeli Day parade in the city.
I will see you.
There was a bunch of Breslin guys.
Good morning, everybody.
Booklets, that's what they do.
Oh,
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
There's little
Good, good, good.
one of those, do not-
You're at home? Or you're in
Yeah.
Greece?
Yeah.
I'll be talking in the morning, I'll see you out, we'll say it at the end. But basically.
So
explain
let's
that.
start. Just
And,
Leonardo.
something.
Good morning.
Morning, now I see you.
Then I came here and I said, yeah, but I want to Lake Philip.
That's my alter ego.
That's
Yeah, I
about
see.
12 years ago, 14 years.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of time that somebody, the older kids in the tax, you know, energy, young people.
Mhm.
And it's not gonna happen. You know, my dad. Yeah, I had that thing.
There's the energy here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So different.
The energy to reach higher.
Those edibles yesterday, the Kiddush didn't hurt either.
Reaching
Were you
higher.
given one?
You're reaching
Were you
higher.
honored with an edible?
An edible.
Yes, they were they're passing around. I caught it, the corner of my eye.
Oh, is it brownies?
I don't know exactly what it was. I think it was like Jello, a gummy.
Yeah, yeah.
Gummies?
See, Doc, you see what you missed? Lenny, you see what you missed when you don't come to the High Center?
What did I miss?
You should have come to the High Center.
What
on
did
my
I
way.
miss?
You missed gummies,
I'm on my way.
Oh.
and he's on his way. Well, yesterday by Kiddush, we had cholent and kugel and salad and gummies. We should. It wasn't sanctioned, and I didn't inhale. Okay, so we'll begin. It's 9:45 exactly. We'll begin. Yesterday we read the portion of Lech Lecha. No, with the portion of Vayera.
Vayera.
Sorry, I was thinking of Lech Lecha, like go, go, go. That Hashem is telling Trump to go, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know what the truth is. So that was just start off with a joke. But maybe it's Biden go. Who knows? So we read the portion yesterday of God appeared to Abraham. So Abraham, it was the Torah tells us it was the third day after his bris. And God came to visit him because the third day of the bris is the toughest day. And God came to visit him on the third day. Where was Abraham? And this is part of our DNA. This is part of whom we are. Abraham, right? He's 99 years old. He had just cut off his foreskin, unthinkable. And he was sitting outside his tent like he always did to see if there's any guests that he can bring in to his tent. So even though he was in most pain and he was discomfort, etc., he nonetheless did not give up his mission. Right? Nothing could stop him. We learned a couple of things from Avram. First of all, is that we learn kindness from him. You know, the Jewish people, it says they're rachmanim. We're compassionate people. We're three things. The Jewish people are rachmanim, baishanim, and lamdanim. So rachmanim first. Rachmanis means that we have compassion. We hate to see the homeless, right? It just bothers us to the core because we're rachmanim, right? We're baishanim. We're not, we're not the most outgoing people. We kind of do a lot of our chesed, we do quietly. A lot of our good we do quietly. While it's true that you inspire people by adding your name to something, but if everything would be equal, and the Rebbe once told somebody who wanted to give anonymously a nice amount of money, and the Rebbe says, if you make your name public, you'll inspire others. So while it's true, chashoy, quiet, under the radar. However, the Rebbe says you'll do more by not being under the radar. But naturally, we're more under the radar type of people. And the third thing we are is lamdanim. We like to study. We're people of the book. And we like to learn something every day. I mean, it's aside from being obligated, we like to study. As a general, we're not, for the most part, we're not we'd rather read something that's nonfiction than fiction. So we may add a little bit of Jack Reacher into our lives, but would much prefer to read something that's Torah or I read these days. I'm reading psychology. I'm just fascinated by one particular doctor. But that's what I'm done. We like to read. So Avram was sitting there, and God saw him. God was Kachayim. It was a very, very hot day. The Midrash says that God made it extremely hot because He didn't want visitors to come, because Abraham was healing. But Abraham was miserable, so God allowed not people but angels. So the Torah tells us there were Anoshim, there were people, but as the story goes on, as we flesh the story on, we see that there were angels. And what did Abraham do? The Torah tells us, even though he had just had his bris, by Yorat, he ran. He ran. It may have been a hobble, right? But he ran, and then he said, and we discussed this yesterday, Vayomar, Adonai, my master. There were three people, and he addressed the one in the middle. If I can find favor in your eyes, come into my tent, let me serve you. So that's the regular meaning. According to other commentaries, he was saying to God, Vayomar, Adonai, my Lord, if I find favor in your eyes, don't go away. Let me just take care of these guests, and then we'll converse later. And from here we learn that Bikur Chaylim, visiting the sick, and welcoming guests are on par. One's not greater than the other. So they're two great mitzvahs, which the Mishnah tells us that we get our reward in this world and in the next world. Both of those mitzvahs, visiting the sick and welcoming guests, is on par. So they acquiesced, these three people, and they came in, and Avram made them a scrumptious meal. First he served them dairy, then he served them meat, right? And so if you notice, that's the order, because if you serve the meat first, we know in halacha, not that necessarily it was a Torah, but they say Avram knew the Torah, then you have to wait a minimum. In the Netherlands, they wait 1 hour, right? So, and some people wait 3 hours, and most people have the custom, at least Ashkenazim, have the custom to wait 6 hours. But after dairy, you don't have to wait, unless it's aged cheese. If it's aged cheese, then it has the same status as meat because it takes longer to digest. But if it's just a coffee or soft cheese, or you're taking cream cheese, or you're taking some cheddar, you don't have to wait. You can wash your mouth out. Some people wait half hour. So he served them first there while he was getting the meat ready. So what would be considered aged cheese? So the old Swiss cheese, with the holes in it, they would be considered aged cheese. Parmesan, according to the OK, is considered aged cheese. But most of the things that we have, whether it's farmer's cheese, cottage cheese, ricotta cheese, mozzarella, it's all considered soft cheeses. And so the requirement after dairy, before you eat meat, is to take a drink. Water, not milk, water, something else, just to clean your palate. Right? Some people say that you need to take milk and eat something part, like a piece of bread. That cleans your teeth. And then you could take meat right after. My father used to wait an hour. My mother used to wait half hour. So, right, I wait 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. So he served them, and then they turned to, and he got Yishmael involved. Yishmael was very, he made sure that he understood the concept of being philanthropic and being kind, now the difference between Abraham and Yishmael is Yishmael has selective kindness, right? Support whom they wish to support, and they'll hurt who they wish to hurt. Abraham, on the other hand, it didn't matter who passed by his house. He didn't care. He just used to take care of everybody. They ate. Then the one angel. Now we learn, by the way, that Rashi says that each angel can only do one mission at a time. a human being is expected way more of us than an angel. So a human being can daven and put on tefillin and give tzedakah, right? We can do this all at the same time. An angel has one thing to do and one thing only. Once it's finished that mission, it goes on to the next. So God sent 3 angels, right? One was to tell Sarah that she's going to give birth, one to destroy Sodom, and one to heal Abraham. Once he told Sarah, once he healed Abraham, the angel was then able to save Lot. And the one who came to tell Sarah left. Right? So there was no need. So there was do one thing at a time. Anyway, they asked, Aye, Sarah. Where is Sarah? And Abram said, she's in the tent. She's in the tent. So and Sarah, came to stand at the door of the tent, and he blessed her. Anyway, the one thing he said to her was, that in a year from now you're going to have a son. Sarah was 90, Avram was 99. So they were 10 years apart, which is an interesting answer from the Rebbe. The Rebbe felt if it was more than 10 years apart, you shouldn't get married. Right?
Oh,
Yeah, so the Rebbe felt if somebody, like my sister was 20 and she wanted to get married, she did marry this guy who was 29. They wrote into the Rebbe about the age difference. And the Rebbe said it's not an issue. Right? You can't get, but more than 10 years, the Rebbe generally would say it's not a good idea. Avram and Sarah with 10 years. So he said, you're going to have a son. Sarah laughed. And she says, it's impossible for me to have a kid. It's impossible for me to have a kid, right? I've lost the juices, right? And my husband is old. My husband is old. In other words, he's also infertile. So God turned to Avram and said, why did Sarah lie? Why did Sarah laugh and not believe that she's not going to have a son, right? And say that I am old. She didn't say I am old. She said my husband is old. She said I've lost all my juices and my husband is old. If you look so from here we learn that for shalom bayis purposes, to create domestic harmony, you're allowed to lie. So in other words, someone calls you up, a woman calls you up and says something about her husband. And then the husband calls out, what did my wife tell you? I'm so angry. You can make up something. You don't have to, and to keep the peace between husband and wife, God told the white lie. God told the white lie. So okay, so it's Sarah in verse 12 on page 80, right? It says, my master, Adoni Zaken, and my husband is old. And then verse 13, Hashem said to Avram, why does Sarah laugh? And Vani Zakanti, and I am old. So you see that clearly, one verse after the other, there was something else said.
You said my husband is old.
And God said, why did she say, I am old? Can I not do anything? And Sarah said, I didn't laugh. And Hashem said, you did laugh. But it was over. Right? It was over. It was, God was a little upset, but he let it go. And the blessing was given. The blessing, we don't find any ramifications for Sarah laughing at all. For Sarah laughing, some people say that Sarah died much earlier than Abraham because she laughed. But that sounds very harsh. Anyway, and Hashem blessed them, and Hashem told them that you are going to be a great nation, and through you, you're going to have great people. The next thing is the angels now continued on their path. They had a 20-kilometer walk, and they were going to destroy Sodom. Hashem says, I'm going to tell Avram. I'm not going to hide from him. If he's going to be the leader of the people, then I should tell him. So when he told him, Avram started to argue with God and started to pray. And he said, Hashem, you're gonna destroy tzaddikim and rishayim. The righteous and the wicked are both going to be destroyed. What if there's 50? And Hashem said, I won't do it for 50. What if there's 45, 40, 30, 20, 10? And so Avram stood there, and this discussion took a while. And once they said there's no 10, he knew from the flood that there was no help. So the flood, we had Noah and his wife, 3 kids and their wives, that was 8. You had Og, the king of Bashan, who became the king of Bashan. Og hung onto the ark, and God. And it was still destroyed. He said, okay, so what if the less than 10? You know, it was you had Og 9 and then God. He said, okay, I have nothing more to say. I have nothing more to say. But from here we learn is that we do not have to accept fate. We do not have to accept every decision and just say, it's God's will. It's God's will. In fact, every day in the Amidah, we talk about us going back to Jerusalem. Every day, 3 times a day. We talk about, please build the Holy Temple. You could argue he'll build it when it's ready. Right? Please bring us back to Jerusalem. You could argue when it's ready. And there are those that argue that, by the way. There are, right, the anti-Zionists, the religious anti-Zionists say, you know, we want Mashiach now. That sounds like disrespectful. Right? So the Rebbe quotes the Amidah. So, and the Rebbe also quotes another story. He says, why was it placed in the Amidah? Why were these blessings? And there's a lot of them. Please reinstate the Sanhedrin. Please, Jerusalem. Please build the city of David. Please, right? Why? He says, because when Hashem, with the sin of the sin of the spies, right? So Hashem said, you're going to be 40 years in the desert. And the people were upset, and they were upset for a day or two, and then they moved on. And then Hashem said to Moshe, you are going to die. And you're not going to go into Israel. And Moshe prayed, but the populace did not pray. Nobody else prayed. Moshe himself prayed 515 times, right? They had Hanan, the numerical value of that word, and nobody else prayed. And Moshe was upset because Moshe felt that if the populace had prayed, it would have broken the decree. So so we want Moshe now. We want Moshe now. We want Mashiach now. And so the Rebbe says that it's up to the populace. If you don't ask the Mashiach, if you don't ask to rebuild, it shows apathy. Oh, when it's ready, I can't deal with this. When it's ready, I'll wait. Right?
So you ask for what you want, but you accept the outcome.
Well, God has his reasons, right? God has his reasons. There's Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs passed away yesterday, right? The chief rabbi of London, and a powerful man. So he was asked, why do bad things happen to good people? So there's a short clip I saw last night. And so he says that God didn't give us the answer. And you know why God didn't give us the answer? He says, because if God gave us the answer, then we would have to accept the bad. So he didn't give us an answer, so we don't have to accept the bad. That was Jonathan Sachs' answer. Right? It's a totally new way of looking at it, right? He says, if God said, okay, it's because of this and this and this, we would say, ooh, okay. But he says, no, Hashem didn't want us to say, okay, so he didn't give us the answer. Right? Here, we don't have to accept. We don't have to accept. We want Mashiach now. We want the Bet HaMikdash now. We want Yerushalayim now. We want, right? It's one after the other. So Avram argued the best as he can. And he told God, off of Ephah, I'm dust and ashes. In other words, saying, if I can let them live, if I have, want them to live, how about you, God? Come on. And God said, no, they are too wicked. There's sometimes where wickedness cannot be, what does it say? It says, when God allowed, to Noah, he says that anything, the Midrash tells us that I'll accept anything except murder. I will not tolerate murder. Edresh mimenu. I'm gonna get the person. I'm going to distinctly deal with it, etc. We see that Moshe argued.
What? That's okay.
We see,
I'm comfortable here. It's fine. Thank you so much. What?
absolutely. We have to ask. So we have to ask God, right? And look. We have to ask God. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is not now. No. Sometimes the answer is no. But that doesn't change what we have to do. We have to ask. We have to ask God, and we have to do what we do, right? We have to ask God. God then decide. But by not asking God, that is not a good approach, right? So we can pray for somebody who's very, very sick, and you have hundreds and thousands of people praying, and then the person dies, right? So we did our part. We can never be accused of not doing our part. I think that's the message. And that was the issue with Noah, by the way. Noah, when God said, I'm going to flood the world, Noah didn't say anything. Noah just said, build an ark, okay. I'm going to bring a flood, okay. He didn't say, God, what do you mean the flood? You're going to destroy this whole, right? The whole kit and caboodle, God, everything? Come on. He said nothing. And that's why Noah's vilified by the commentaries. They said he was a tzaddik. Yeah, in his generation, he was a tzaddik. He wasn't really a tzaddik, they pick up on that word. He was a tzaddik in his generation. Yeah, in his generation, he was the best of the lot.
He saved the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have to ask. And we have to beg, we have to pray, we have to supplicate, we have to cajole, right? We have to do what we have to do. And we're taught, by the way, that the Rebbe used to do this a lot. That when you pray, when you ask for something specific, right, you add an action to it. You say, I'm going to pray, but not only pray, I'm going to give tzedakah. Not only pray, I'm going to do this mitzvah. And even the Mishaberachs, right? By I'll give tzedakah before, because the idea is that God, we are in this physical world. We're praying to you in the abstract, but we're grounding it in the physical world, our prayer, by doing an action. Anyway, Avram went to his place, and the angels continued on their way. When they get into Sodom, and it's Sodom and Amorah is actually 5 cities. Right now, I think we should call them the 5 towns. Right? So there's they came to the 5 towns, and the biggest one was Sidamorah, and they came to Sodom, right? And who lo and behold is sitting there outside his tent? Lot, right? He learned from Abraham, right? The problem is that there wasn't a hospitable place, as we'll see. So he tells them, come into the house. They said no. They said no, we're going to sleep in the street. They said no, don't do that. Come into the house. They came into the house. As soon as they came into the house, it was banging on his door, saying, "You have guests? You have guests? Send them out so we may know them." Which is why it was called Sodom, right? So Lot said the unthinkable. Lot said, they're my guests. They've come here to my house for protection, but here are my 2 girls. Right? I mean, if that's not sick, what is? Don't touch my guests, but here are my 2 girls, right? But that is the extreme. There are plenty of people who take their family for granted and will treat in the workplace nicer than they will their spouse. Treat in the workplace nicer, have more patience for other people's kids than their kids, right? So granted, Lot was sick. He was a sick man, right? And one cannot defend what he did. However, I think it's a lesson, right? They've come into I protect them and I go this and that, but charity starts at home. Charity starts at home. So we have to be careful that we don't neglect our family on our quest for whatever, because that is it's kind of what Lot did in the extreme. So anyway, so they said, no, we want the guests, and the Lot came outside and they started to beat up Lot, and the angels brought them in. There were two angels left, one to save Lot and his family, and one to destroy. Once again, one mission per angel. And they told them, we're going to destroy this place. We're going to get rid of this terrible culture of evil, and go tell your family. Right? And we're going to actually turn over Sodom. What we're going to do is and that's where the commentaries is. But it says by Yafach, when God, he actually turned over. He took bottoms up. He took a clod of earth right from underneath and then burnt it in sulfur and so Lot went to his sons-in-law and they laughed. They said, that's not going to happen. Sound familiar, by the way? Sound familiar? Right? But if you go to in the early 1930s or the late 1920s, 29, 33, 34, right? 36, right? As it was, they were marching forward and they were started to execute their plan. So you had leaders, rabbis and others, who said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The turning over of our city ain't gonna happen, right? The French will protect us, the Austrians will protect us, this will protect us, that will protect us. We're so big. Berlin, come on, we have high positions in Berlin. It's never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. And it did. So the sons-in-law of Lot said, it's ridiculous. Most ridiculous thing. Sodom is going to be destroyed and we're going to be killed. And they did not listen. They did not listen. So, and by the way, there were a lot of rabbis, right? If you read up on the history, a lot of rabbis were blamed because they were trying to keep their communities intact instead of everybody just running, right? And but because of the advice that they gave, died. I can't blame them. We weren't in their shoes, but I think people that just believed it could not. I mean, it was only 75 years ago, right? That they did what they did. So it's interesting. The Jews in Germany, for the most part, were not killed. If you take a look at the numbers of each country, Germany had the least. Right? Germany, because it took Hitler time to get his machine in place, and the German Jews were close to the best. They were there, and then they were kicked out of there. They were all professors and philosophers and poets, and right, and they were kicked out of their prominent positions, right? Lawyers, doctors, right, and they were part of the culture fabric of Berlin, right?
Not because they were put to work.
No.
Was it Germany?
They lived in Germany. They had, for the most part, assimilated, right? For the most part, not all, but they saw the writing on the wall and they got out. Unfortunately, the Russian Jews thought they were safe. Mother Russia is going to protect them. The Ukrainian Jews thought they were safe. I mean, Ukraine probably has the most. Maybe Poland has the most. I think Poland had 3 million of the 6. And Poland today is like nothing.
Why Ukraine? That was Germany.
They made it to Ukraine, yeah. They had trouble in Russia. They did, by the way, they did get to Belarus. They did, like the town of Lubavitch, the Germans decimated it, right? That's Belarus, but north of Moscow, by a few hundred kilometers. So they did get there, but they had actually already fled. But a lot of communities didn't flee because, like the sons of Lot, they did nothing. There is a great book. There's a great book. I mean, it's a tragic book. It's a very thick book. It's called The Pity of It All. That's what it's called. It traces Moses Mendelssohn, the philosopher, the rabbi, from the time he reached the gates of the, what was Berlin called? It was called something else, Prussia, right? By the time he reached Prussia until the war, the history. It gives the history from the time he under the arch of the city until Hitler came. And it traces. Now, interesting to note, Moses Mendelssohn, right, was a German Jew, and Moses Mendelssohn was, as many of his writings, Orthodox Jew, philosopher, and this, that, and the other. Not one of he does not have one grandchild that's Jewish. All his boys intermarried. All of them. I think 7 of them. Right? So even he didn't get out alive, if you get my drift, right? Even he didn't. There's not one grandchild of the great Moses Mendelssohn who's Jewish. And he was a prominent rabbi and philosopher.
So this reminds me kind of like coronavirus and what's going on, in Brooklyn. We're going to be okay.
Right.
Ignoring writing on the wall.
Right. So, I go to Brooklyn. My kids live there. Nobody cares about masks. Really, I mean, I couldn't be in a sea of people. I'm wearing a mask and no one else is. They started to give fines to store owners who don't wear masks. So now this.
What are the head rabbis saying? They obviously have to.
I don't know. I think there's no leadership.
Good.
I think there's no leadership. But what's maddening is that last night there were thousands of people in DC, thousands of people congregating in New York City, right? And you don't hear Como say that community, you don't hear anything.
Yeah.
You only hear when the Jews do it. So it's maddening. It's absolutely maddening. My personal belief, and I wrote an article to this effect, and I sent it to the Crown Heights community. I got hate mail, but I said, wear your damn mask. Just wear your mask. Wear it. Right? He's not asking a lot. He didn't close your schools because you're not in the red zone. He's asking one thing: wear your mask. Right? Just do it. And but they feel in Crown Heights specifically, and probably other communities. I can only speak for Crown Heights because my family, my brother-in-law, and sister. I was in a sukkah on sukkah's the holidays of my father's yard site, so I went there, and I was wearing a mask in the sukkah, right? Zoe was wearing a mask, and I turned to my brother-in-law and I said, "What's going on? Why is there nobody wearing a mask?" I understand when you eat, you have no choice, right? So he goes, "Who here in this sukkah has had corona already?" 17 hands went up. Zoe and I did not put up our hands. Everybody, there were 19 people in that sukkah. 17 have had it. That's their answer. Antibodies. Now, nobody knows. Yeah, but we got it. We're not going to,
So many people that are dying though.
It's less and less, and it's interesting. I think we've culled the herd, somewhat. But
I heard of this guy who owns a jet company, and the amount of money he's making shipping caskets to Israel and be buried there.
I'm sure.
Crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a meeting today actually in Brooklyn. I'm going to wear my mask to that meeting. The other person may not, but I'm going to wear it. I think, first of all, it's a law of the land. There is dina de machos dina. It is you're not allowed to, and the only time you can ignore the law of the land is if it conflicts with God. So if the Russians, when they outlawed, or the Greeks outlawed circumcision, you got to ignore them. You got to give a bris. You do it on, under, you have a, but otherwise, if it doesn't conflict with Judaism, you got to do it.
Also, I think that
You're not allowed to jump the turnstile to go into the subway.
it doesn't help the narrative either.
No, not at all. So moving on. So the sons-in-law died, and Lot's rest of his family died. Right? And the Malach, the angel, told him when he was running with him, he says, "Don't look back. You're not allowed to look back." And the reason I'm not allowed to look back is because you were saved with very minimal merits. It's not as if you weren't a bad egg, right? Lot, Mrs. Lot, and you can't look back. And that's the same argument that some people say that in the ark with Noah, he wasn't allowed to have a clear window. It had to be translucent, because Noah was not allowed to look at the suffering of the animals and the humans dying, drowning. Right. So here, right, there's one thing if you were completely righteous, and then you could say, "I try to tell you guys," but so they're not allowed to look back. And Torah tells us that Lot's wife looked back. So if you look carefully at the words, I just have to find it. Yeah. Verse on page 88, verse 26, right? If you look carefully, his wife peered behind him. His wife peered behind him. So basically, she took a look over his shoulder and she became a pillar of salt. Why salt? Salt is because Sodom, you were not allowed to, if you had a guest, you weren't allowed to, that person's dish was not allowed to have salt in it. It had to be flavorless. If you had a guest, you weren't allowed to offer them salt. You had to make them a very bland dish, very low sodium, and they weren't allowed to add, right? So that's why they say salt. There's also another lesson here, is that when a person is full, right, they don't see someone else's hunger. A hungry person recognizes a homeless person, like they share their pizza, right? And it says, therefore, before we bench, we have to wash away the salt of Sodom. So washing away is grease, etc., but also washing away that we're full, we're satiated. We have to make sure not to become so just into ourselves that we don't recognize the plight of someone else.
I heard another one where it says you shouldn't look back in your life and cry.
So yeah, but that's actually a very good discussion. It's interesting. So she became a pillar of salt. But what's hu acharov? Why does she have to look past him?
That means she's standing apart.
Yeah, it probably means that. It literally means that. But there's a commentary that says that she actually was just like Korach, and Korach stood up to Moses, right? And Korach wouldn't stop, right? So the commentaries say that Korach had a vision that Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel the prophet, was going to come from him. So he said to himself, I'm not going to die here. I'm going to have Samuel come from me. What he didn't bank on was that his sons, Korach's sons, lived, right? But he himself died. So she looked behind Lot. She was saying, who's going to come out of Lot? And she had a prophecy that there's going to be these two great nations, Ammon and Moab, come out of Lot. So she goes, well, we're not going to die, right? That's what it means for hu acharov. So, but as Joel says, we learn a lesson from looking back. The angel said, if one's life doesn't go the way it's expected, whether it's a colossal failure or whether it's just miserable existence, it won't help you to regurgitate. It won't help you to regurgitate and to say, where did I go wrong and what did I do and how, woe is me. It's thinking. What you have to do is look forward. You are allowed to look back as a peak to learn from your past, but you're not allowed to look back. You can turn back, but the idea is you think about, okay, wow, I just got into this huge argument with my spouse. How could I have done better so I don't have this discord for the next 2 weeks, right? But to look back and regurgitate every nasty thing that he said or she said, or every bad decision one has made, it's not helpful. And it says that's why God made eyes in the front of a head and not in the back. It would have been very smart to have an eye right here, right? Right. So you see a mugger coming, right? You can catch him before he mugs you in the streets of New York, right? In de Blasio City. But no, Hashem didn't make it. Hashem made the eyes in front of it because don't look back. It doesn't help. You just got to say, okay, this is where I am. Where can I go from here?
Why do the people of Sodom not allow their guests to control them food? Is it like this?
To discourage guests. There were, I mean, there's many midrashim, which is, it's really hard to understand. Is that they basically had no hotels, they had no motels, right? They would not set up a Motel 6 or a Red Roof Inn or even a Howard Johnson's, nothing. Forget about a Hilton or a W. They just didn't like guests. They were very, focused. They were very laser vision about their populace. So the guests, they're not paying taxes. They're not welcome here.
There's another side to looking back. One is they say, like, if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're bound to repeat them. So wouldn't it be necessary to kind of review what you've done wrong, how to go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. You should look back, but we're talking about more of the, the remorse, not the remorse, where you get so stuck in the mud about you're depressed that you made a bad investment, right? That you cannot move forward. The idea is, okay, so it was a bad investment, so I got to, I can't do that again. But if you're depressed and don't get out of bed, you'll never make anything of yourself. I think that's the idea. So God destroyed. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saved one mitzar. Lot, as they were traveling, Lot said, "Please, we're going to die. It's catching up to us." Look, there's a little city here, very small. It's one of the smallest of the 5 towns, Woodsboro, right? It's the smallest of the 5 towns, right? Please let us go there. And they acquiesced, and they went there. They went into there, and they went into a cave. And God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is actually where the Yam HaMelech is today, where the Dead Sea is today. They say that is where Sodom and Gomorrah was located. It's there is on the way to Arad, which is south. Not when you come to Yam HaMelech from Jerusalem, you still have like another 50 kilometers to get to Arad. So where Arad, so you pass Masada, 50 kilometers past Masada. There's Arad. They say there's a pillar of salt that's basically like this, small on the top, and then it's the shoulders. It's bigger, and it goes down. So yeah, I've never seen it personally. I've seen pictures of it.
Interesting that it would be there. That obviously is the lowest place on earth.
Lowest place on earth, right? Lowest place on earth. And as you go to Sodom, if you remember, right, as you go to Sodom, you're literally going down and turning around the mountain, going down and down and down, right? And you see signs 1,500 feet below sea level, and then as you go. And Jerusalem is extremely high.
Nothing can live there either.
Nothing, yeah. Sodom, there's nothing, not even, right? They sent scuba divers. You can also Google it. So they have pictures of videos of the scuba divers in the Dead Sea, and it's just nothing.
Wow.
It's just nothing. But
You have the rejuvenated qualities too.
yeah.
And the minerals in the water.
Minerals in the water, sure. And the mud. So the mud is like the sulfur. But if you smell the sulfur, right? It smells like rotten eggs. You smell the sulfur. It's pretty wild, actually. Anyway, so Lot and his wife were turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his 2 daughters were saved. His 2 daughters thought that it was the end of the world. They thought that, my goodness, we're done. It's up to us to keep society around. right? And they got their father drunk. And the first night, the older one, she was she had relations with her father, and he says he did not know of her lying down or getting up. And then the next night, they got drunk again, and did not know her lying down and getting up. Now so clearly this is and they both became pregnant. They both became pregnant at at the first, and we have Dr. Goldman, we have an OBGYN here, but Rashi says that the reason why they became pregnant, even though they have never been with man, is they actually got rid of their hymens before they lay with their father. So that's how they were able to get pregnant from the first shot. The oldest one called it Moav, from daddy, right? The second one called it Ammon, my people. So the oldest one was a little cruder than the. Now, how could Lot do this? And how could Lot do this? So I think the answer is anybody who he didn't protect these daughters anyway. He was ready to give them to the masses, right? So if you don't have that boundary, right? Go just have sex with my kid. As a parent, right? You're very worried about your children when they reach the age, right? You're very worried, and they start gallivanting around town, and you give them the talk, and please practice safe sex, right? Please. He was whatever he was going to throw him out. When you don't have that boundary, when you're that sick, right? You're going to have no boundaries, and you're going to be sick, right? So he had sex with his kids, and they had Ammon and Moab. Now, what's interesting is from Moab came Ruth, and from Ruth came David, and from David comes Mashiach, right? I said the kingship would never leave David, right? So David, it was Shlomo, and then it was destroyed, and then we came back, and it was destroyed again. But the bottom line is Mashiach has to come from David, has to come from David. But David comes from this crazy ancestral, right? So the Rebbe explains. We discussed it yesterday. The Rebbe explains is that Mashiach, he's got to be there. He's got to redeem, and he's got to be able to resonate with everybody, even those that are born of incestuous relationships, even those that are so low and so decrepit and so deranged and so debased. Mashiach still is going to redeem them, right? So how could Mashiach redeem somebody who had, who's a product of sex with their parent? The answer is Mashiach knows how, because he has the ability, he understands, he's the ability to reach the lowest level and uplift it. So Mashiach is not there just for the righteous. Mashiach is not there just for the regular person. Mashiach is also there for the worst of the worst, right? To usher in the utopian era, and he has the ability to resonate, because spiritually, that's where he's from as well. So that's how the Rebbe explains it. That yes, David came from bastardry, right? But he I don't know if it's bastardry. I guess it's, yeah. That's a definition of a bastard, by the way. Is somebody who was born from an incestuous relationship, right? That's
in commentary on page 90, Rabbi, it says that they weren't considered, they weren't held to be incestuous because their thoughts were pure in what they did. The daughter? Father, it says, yeah.
yeah.
In there,
It
but
was-
not the father.
Oh, wow.
That's why they could merit.
Ammon and Moab. Yeah, it's just oh my goodness. So thanks, Joel. So Joel says that they, because they really thought the end of the world was near, that they were actually not. They were not held accountable. He was, because he According to halacha, a man could rape a woman could never rape a man. If a man says, I was raped by a woman, right? The judges, the Sanhedrin, would say, no, we don't think so, sir. Right? According to, right? So, so once Abram saw the destruction,
But that he also knew that the whole world wouldn't. He knew it wouldn't be the whole world. It's the city.
right?
Not the daughters.
The daughters didn't know, but he did. He's just decrepit, right? Just deranged fellow. So after that, Avram saw the smoke, and then Avram moved away from Sodom. He didn't have to be so close to Sodom to watch upon Lot, right? He moved away, and he went to Gaza. He went to the Gaza Strip, where Abimelech was king, and so he was lived at that until that time. He lived in Hebron. He lived in Hebron 25 years. He lived in Hebron after Sarah died. For 25 years, he lived in Hebron. After Sarah died, then he sort of moved on to, or a little before Sarah died. It's unclear. But anyway, he went and he said that he used the same spiel. She's not my wife. She's my sister. Abimelech, right, wanted her to be his concubine or his wife, and God punished Abimelech just like he punished Paro. And Abimelech said, "Why'd you do this?" He says, "Because your people are debased." He says, the customs are not asking me about the stuff I'm bringing into Gaza. They're asking me, is she your wife or sister? He says, I was fearful to say she was my wife. And what customs ask that question? He's bringing in a bunch of stuff. Okay, what are you bringing in? And what can we tax you? But no, they didn't care about that. They only cared about the woman. So Abimelech said, please, God told Abimelech, if they don't pray for you, you're a dead man. Abimelech said, please, you can stay in Gaza. You can stay in Palestine. You can stay here. He gave Sarah money for putting in such a hard position. He said, they gave Abram presents. He let them stay in the land. Abram stayed there 26 years. And they actually made a covenant together. Abram and Abimelech, the king of Palestine. Abram and Abimelech made, as we'll read a little bit later in the Torah, but we'll skip it, we'll do it now. It says that Abram said, my people, he said, Abimelech told him, we've been kind to you. We've let you stay here. Please be kind to us and swear to us you'll never hurt us. So Abimelech made that promise. Now, Abram made that promise, and they offered up 7 sheep, whatever. Hashem was actually upset with Abram because Gaza, Palestine, was part of what God planned to give to the Jews when they went to it, right? So, but Joshua, because of this pledge, Joshua was never able to conquer it. And Gaza was always a thorn on our side. If you think of the story of Samson, where did he kill? Where did he get caught? Who wanted him dead? Palestine. When he pushed on those pillars and it came down on the royals of Palestine, Abimelech's grandkids. Nowadays, where are the rockets being shot from? Palestine. Where do we just vacate 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Gaza. So he says that covenant that Avram made, Avram actually didn't have the right to make. And therefore God said, offer up your son. They say that was a direct response to saying, you made a covenant to save your son and your family, that Abimelech shouldn't torture you, right? That you caused the people, the rest of the Jewish people, to be tortured until Mashiach, right? So he says, so therefore, I'm going to offer up your son. It was almost like a punishment test, because you weren't supposed to do what you're supposed to do. Meanwhile, Avram had a kid, and he named him Yitzchak, which means laughter, means joy. right? They always knew they were going to name him Yitzchak because he laughed and Sarah laughed, and right, Yitzchak is above nature, and 99 years, 90 years. Yitzchak was the only one of the patriarchs who never left Israel. Avram left to Egypt, and Yaakov left to Egypt. Yitzchak never left. He was considered an ola tumima, a perfect offering. He never ever left. Just like a perfect offering cannot leave the temple gates, he couldn't leave the gates of Israel. He always remained in Israel. He never left. He was considered extremely holy because of the offering. He gave a bris on the 8th day. He invited all the dignitaries. People accused Sarah of not being the mother, of Abram not being the father. And that was Abimelech as a father. So God made Yitzchak look exactly like Abram. When you look at a kid and you say that the kid looks like one of the parents, so oh my God, this is a carbon, right? Right. A lot of times you see it in like, I have this classmate who's extremely not good looking. I don't want to use the word ugly, right? In yeshiva, somebody called him a mutant. Which is terrible. I never called him that. But he had a kid. You could tell it's his kid, right? You can tell it's his kid, right? As the kid was born, I went to the bris, and you go, holy moly, right? Right? He has every attribute of the father, like this, and right. So it looked like it looked like Abram's kid. So God made that, took away that, and Sarah actually had so much milk. She was the wet nurse. She was the wet nurse for many other people. The halacha is, by the way, that if you have milk, the halacha is that you cannot suckle an idolater. Right? You can. A woman can be a wet nurse, but not to somebody idolatry. How could Sarah do this? The answer is that she was actually uplifting God's name. She's 90 years old and she's a wet nurse for many. It was like a miracle, and everybody said, wow, the God of Sarah, the God of Abraham, look at that, look at that. Then trouble started. Who was going to inherit Abraham? So as the boys got older, so there was Ishmael and Yitzchak, and they were playing, and there's different commentaries. One of them is Ishmael told Yitzchak, you're never going to inherit daddy. I'm going to inherit daddy. I'm the older one. Another commentary is that it says they were playing. He was showing him sexual stuff, right? Come. I got a Pelishtim, pornography book here of the Philistine women, right? Right. It's and others say that he was actually they were shooting arrows at each other, like they were kids used to throw darts. Oh, that was close, right? You ever did that? Oh, I did that. Not normal, but I did it.
Kids think they're invincible.
I did it. We used to throw darts at each other from a distance.
Didn't they say you should have like almost like an obsession with these things, like killing animals?
Yeah. So that's the other commentary, is that he showed him how to break a steer's neck and things like that. And Sarah said, get him out. And Avram said, I don't want him. It's my kid. So God said, your wife Sarah has more prophecy than you do. Listen to her voice. When it comes to rearing kids, the woman is more of the, we call them the fairer sex. They're not necessarily the fairer sex. The woman is more of the one that's in tune with the kid. I mean, of course, you can have a mother not in tune. You can have a decrepit mother, but the woman is more nurturing and has more of the sensitivity of the spiritual being of the child. The mother can say, you know what? And by the way, I see this with my wife. My wife, right, over the years, I said, we got to do this because. And so I said, no, it's not. Come on. So that's far-fetched. And it happened. And after a few times of things happening, But when it's interesting when Zoe says something that in my mind I say, you know, Zoe, I say verbalize it, even though I don't feel it inside. I say, I'm actually going to, you know, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to acquiesce to what you're saying because you've been right before. Even though in my mind I say, wow, that's. But that's what God was telling Avram, get rid of him, get rid of him. So he did. The next day, as hard as it was for him, he gave him a jug of water, gave him some food, and he told Hagar to go home, go back to Egypt. Ishmael developed a fever, and the water ran out. And what she did was unthinkable, as the Torah tells us, that she placed him in Achad HaSichem, one of the little desert bushes there, the tumbleweed or whatever it was, and she went Metachave Keshes. She rounded the bend, so she should not see her son die. Do you know a mother that would do that?
No.
Right? A parent, God forbid, a child is sick. Right? A parent that goes, money doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Right? For one of my children, I spent literally $250,000 to save her. Right? Which I didn't have. Right? One thing if I had it, I didn't. That's what a parent does. She walked away. Right? And an angel comes to her and says, Malach Hagar, what's going on? According to other commentaries, it goes, Malach, what's wrong with you, Hagar? What's wrong with you? And he says, she lifted her eyes and she sees water. Rashi says, or maybe it's not Rashi. Right? So maybe it's not Rashi. The commentary says the water was there all the time. She was so focused on her misery, and she was so not proactive, because a normal mother would be digging troughs. There's got to be water here. There's got to be water here. If there's a tumbleweed here, that means maybe I can get something out, right? No, she just sat there and cried. And the angel said, Malach, and then she found water. And she said, he's going to be a great person, and he's going to be a leader. And 12 princes will come from him, and the rest is history. So there's a commentary that says, why did Hashem let Ishmael live? If Ishmael was a para-Adam, Ishmael was a wild guy, and eventually was going to be this hooligan, and his children would be hooligans and homicide bombers, and it could have been much easier. So the Medrash says that the angel said, kill him. And God said, is he deserving of death this moment? And the angel said, no. So God said, so you want me to kill him the generations in the future? I'm not doing that. So you're only punished for your actions now. You're not punished for actions in the past that you've done teshuvah for. And you definitely, nothing can be held against you in the future for future stuff, even though God knows. So Ishmael lived, and as we know, he thrived. There's 12 princes, which is interesting because God has to create balance in the world. There's also 12 tribes. So if there had been 12 princes of Ishmael and 2 tribes of Ishmael and 2 tribes of Israel, it would have been an unfair, unbalanced. And then, what do you expect of us? But the Torah ends with the Akedah, where God told him to take your son, offer him up. Avram did it, and then to stop the actual, it was a malach. The angel said, Avram, don't touch him. Don't touch him. Don't create a wound. Nothing. Right? I see now that how incredible you are, etc. And I give you blessings. The commentaries explain that God told him to offer up his son, but an angel told him to stop it. From here we learn that to hurt somebody else you're not allowed to do unless instructed by God. To not hurt somebody, you don't need God to tell you to do that. Even an angel can do that. The last few lines of the Torah, it says that after the Akedah, Abraham heard that his brother had given birth. Brother's wife and concubine had given birth, and a bunch of kids were born, right? And Rivka was born, which was going to marry Yitzchak, right? And they say that's why they said it. I heard this from Rabbi Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson says that after Abraham's travail and hard life and the Akedah, right? He hears news that his brother, happy-go-lucky, he had 8 kids. This guy struggled to have 1 kid, right? So it was to tell him that Abraham, that it's not always going to be easy. You may see other people luckier than you. You may see other people more fruitful than you. You may see people just things seem to go easy. However, I want you to know, despite everything, you're my chosen one, right? That I've chosen you. And just because somebody wins the lottery every year and you never win the lottery, it doesn't mean that you're not chosen. You're still the chosen one. So that is that's the way Rabbi Jacobson explains that. There are some people, and you hear this, that Avram was wrong to offer up his son. He should have fought. He should have arguing with God. So I saw a commentary that says that Avram did argue with God. It's just not part of the narrative in the Torah. Who said he didn't argue with him? Who said he didn't say, God, are you sure? I mean, this is the. God said, no, I want you to do it. He says, okay. That's A. B. Avram was quick to argue over someone else, but to argue for yourself, is that noble? Right. So this commentary says it's not noble to argue with yourself. Me personally, I think it is noble to ask God for yourself, for your family. So I don't know. So there's just a couple of interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
No. So it was common practice among all the nations that they would offer up their children to gain power for themselves.
Right. A blood offering.
Blood offering. So here we learn that at the last minute, we're being taught that another person's blood cannot work for you, which is a tremendous thing going forward
Right.
into
Right.
where there are some people who say another person's blood can still.
Right. You have to. Right. The only person you can offer up is yourself. You can't offer up someone else. You can't. So we're going to stop the recording. God bless. See you next week. Don't forget, tomorrow we continue the Genesis course. Tomorrow night is Kristallnacht, 7:00. We have that 94-year-old man survived 2 ghettos, 4 camps, finally made it to Israel and became a prisoner of war in Jordan. What a life. The chosen one.
Online.
That's online.